Hi everyone, this video is to help you learn the 10 plagues in order that God placed on Egypt to make his presence known in the land and to eventually convince Pharaoh to let the Israelites go. So the first 3 plagues affected everyone in Egypt, including the Egyptians and the Israelites. So the first plague that was placed on them was that the water was turned into blood. And to remember this, we're going to hold up our first finger, and you think about when you can think about when you go to the doctor and they prick your finger for blood. Ow! So the first plague was that the water turned into blood. Ow! The second plague was the plagues of frogs, and these frogs went everywhere. So with our 2 fingers that we're holding up for the second plague, we're going to bend them down, and these fingernails are going to become our frog's eyes. Ribbit, ribbit. So the second plague was the plague of frogs. Ribbit, ribbit. The third plague was the plague of gnats. So we're going to hold up our 3 fingers and we're going to swarm them around like gnats, because if you ever walk through some gnats, they just get all over you. So the third plague was the plague of gnats. And then, so for the rest of the plagues, they impacted the Egyptians, but the Israelites did not have these impact them. So the fourth plague was the plague of flies. So for this one, we're going to hold up our 4 fingers, but instead of them all being on one hand, we're going to have 2 on each hand. And then we're going to bring them together and make our fly, and then it can flap its little wings. So the 4th plague on Egypt was the plague of flies. The 5th plague was the death of livestock. So to do this, we're going to have our 5 fingers, and we're going to make it into an animal. So that has its 4 legs and its head, like a elephant or a cow or something. And this is the death of livestock, so our livestock or our animal is going to die. So the 5th plague was the death of livestock. The 6th plague was the plague of boils. So to do this, we're going to have our 6 fingers, but we're going to put this hand down and we're going to pretend that we have sores, which is kind of like what boils are. And we're going to point at them and go, ooh, because they were nasty. So the 6th plague was the plague of boils. The 7th plague was the plague of hail. Now this impacted the animals, the crops, the trees, anything that it hit, because it was so big. So for the 7th plague, for this, we're going to make our animal again, like we did on the 5th plague. And then with these 2 fingers, they're going to be our hail that are going to strike down the animal, and it could die or just seriously hurt the animal. So the 7th plague was the plague of hail. The 8th plague was the plague of locusts. So these animals are similar to grasshoppers, and they can swarm a crop and eat it all up. So since they swarm, we're going to have our 8th plague, but we're going to put 4 fingers on each hand, and we're going to have them swarm around. So the 8th plague was the plague of locusts. The 9th plague was the plague of darkness. So to do this, we're going to hold up our 9 fingers, and with one hand, we're going to cover our eyes, and with the other, we're going to put it out and feel in front of us like we can't see where we're going because we're in the dark. So the 9th plague is the plague of darkness. And then the last plague, the 10th plague, is the death of the firstborn son. So the Israelites were not impacted by this if they participated in the Passover meal. They were to cook and eat a spotless year-old male lamb and eat it with unleavened bread. And for this lamb, they were to take its blood and put it over the doorpost of the houses. And so when the angel of death came by, it would pass over their house, sparing or saving their firstborn son. So to represent this 10th plague, we're going to take our hands, our 10 fingers, and we're going to kind of wipe it like on an imaginary doorpost, like we're smearing the blood of the lamb on the doorpost. So they were to participate in this festival each year to remember what had happened. But this is also a great reminder for us and the ultimate Passover lamb, which was Christ, because he died for us. He was the perfect spotless lamb that was born of a virgin. He lived a perfect life. He died the death that we deserved because we're sinners on the cross. And then he conquered death 3 days later so that we would be able to have a relationship with our Heavenly Father if we placed our faith and trust in him. So to remember this, we can think of the 10th plague, which was the death of the firstborn son. So that was our 10 plagues. We're going to do a quick review just so you can remember them all. So, the first plague was that water was turned into blood. Ow! The second plague was the plague of frogs. Ribbit, ribbit. The third plague was the plague of gnats. The fourth plague was the plague of flies. The fifth plague was the plague that livestock died. The sixth plague was the plague of boils. The seventh plague was the plague of hail. The eighth plague was the plague of locusts. The ninth plague was the plague of darkness. And the 10th plague was the death of the firstborn son. Alright, I hope this video helps you learn the 10 plagues that were placed on Egypt.